I want to go ahead and go into a little bit of the preview and to just put it out there. Baylor, Gonzaga, that's, they're just been.
Oh, you're saying they're going to meet in the final.
I'm just saying in general, like how they played and where they are now, it's probably forced to be reckoned with each of those teams. So are they going to remain on, the place of where they've been and who's going to knock them down? Would they be upset? Someone going to upset them before, going into March Madness? What's going to happen in March Madness? I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with these two teams.
Yeah, Baylor may have the toughest road just because the competition officially in the Big 12, that you could be facing. I don't know what the rest of their schedule looks like, but they technically could have a little bit of a tougher road than Gonzaga could. But they both have looked so good this year. And the thing too, these are both programs that have been in these moments before. I was even the other day about how Baylor has kind of been this team that's been so under the radar the last few years, but it just seems like every couple of years you see them make a nice little run in the tournament, whether it's to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, or just the round of 32, still they're there, and it's a team that you just, don't always associate with going quite as far in the men's side as it does. That being said, Gonzaga is also obviously already there, always there. So you're going to see those two teams go pretty far, I think. The other wild card, though, is going to be what happens when they get to the tournament and you're facing some of these Big Ten teams. The Big Ten has just been full of good competition for the last 2 years. It would have been great, had it not been for the pandemic last year. It would have been really interesting to see how the Big Ten would have fared in the NCAA tournament a year ago, just because you had basically 7 teams that possibly could have made it to that tournament. That's how top heavy the conference was. This year, it's kind of more 4 or 5 teams, I think, that are probably truly part of that conversation. But, and Iowa may not be as ranked as high as Gonzaga or Baylor when we get to that point of the year. But Iowa could go on a run and upset one of them if they were to meet. Michigan has played so well this year. Ohio State's been a surprise at times. And then the other thing about all that is, don't forget the Big Ten's going to have its tournament in Indianapolis. So all the teams from the Big Ten that are going to make the NCAA tournament, they're going to be staying. It's basically going to be like a home field advantage for them for 2 weeks straight, for a week straight, I should say, leading into the tournament itself. So that's also something to keep in mind as we get into the tournament.
Coley, taking a look at the blue blood programs like Kentucky, Duke, North Carolina, Arizona, Indiana, Michigan State, and others like Kansas, a lot of those teams are struggling, and several of them might not even make the field of 68. To what do you attribute these lean times for these programs? Is it a combination of a lack of talent, a lack of coaching, or this pandemic, or do you see something different from these programs and why they are where they are right now?
I wouldn't be surprised if there's some factor with the pandemic in there. It takes obviously creative coaching just this year, thinking about the collective year that we've just been through. And it takes some real buy-in from players, some different levels of effort and dedication day in and day out to get through this season that maybe you haven't had to worry about in years past, just because there are extra things that you have to focus on. I learned that a lot covering college football this year, especially the programs where they didn't really have any COVID issues or didn't have any during the season. It takes a little extra to get through some of this. So I think some of it does go to maybe when I think about some of these blue blood programs, I think of how the assistants do so much of the work, that the head coach is just the face. And, when it comes time for the game plan and for the game, that's where the bulk of their work comes in. And then also recruiting, but it's the assistants who are really fully implementing the game or the game plan leading into the game. They're mostly around the players. They're doing these things. And I think with where we are with the pandemic, that may not fly, honestly. It may be a little more difficult for the head coach to assert himself in a way that he needs to, given these days where we are. And so maybe that's part of why they're struggling. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just that a lot of the other programs across the country just have such good talent. I mean, there is such great parity of basketball talent across the country now compared to what it was even 5 years ago. And I think that's a big part of it as well. I think about the ACC where, like you mentioned, North Carolina, Duke are down, but Virginia is still playing very well. Florida State has been playing well for some years. I actually covered FSU several years ago, so I'm very familiar with Leonard Hamilton and what he can do. But it just seems like they continue picking off these players that might have been options for Duke, might have been options for Carolina in years past, and they're just not going there anymore. So I think that's a big part of it as well. It's just the talent for a lot of these other schools is really rising. It's coming up to the level that some of the blue bloods are having to figure out different ways to compete.
And with that being said, with talent, because we, speaking about these other, smaller teams or that don't have all this light shed upon them, especially going into tournaments. And we've seen that in years past, where you have all this talent, this little school or no name or, not very well known, but then they catapult or they'll, upset this number one seed, because we've seen it, very more frequently. So with that, what is a team that you see or maybe a couple of teams that have that talent and that potential to make it to the tournament, and maybe, hey, don't count this little dog out because there's only because they don't have a name or you don't know them, they can actually make it even further.
A team, at least in this part of the country that we're talking about, and I'm not sure if in other places, but Illinois. I think, I don't know if nationally Illinois is really getting the respect it deserves, but the Illini are playing very well. Ayo Dosunmu, I can never pronounce his last name, but Ayo has been lights out all year. He might be the best player in the Big Ten this year. Luka Garza obviously has played well at Iowa as well. I wouldn't put Iowa in that conversation just because I think that Iowa has turned enough heads the last 2 years that people are seeing what they expect. Even at times they've been a little bit down this season and not fully living up to those expectations. But I still think, I guess if we're asking teams that could make a little bit of a run, I think that's another one. Now I'm trying to think of everybody that I can across the country.
I know I don't ask the easy questions, do I?
I might be blanking. I kind of lost track of them after a certain point in time, but I know Alabama was having a really strong start to the year, and I wouldn't be surprised if, I'm not sure what they're doing right now, but if Alabama's continued to play to that level, that could be another team that the thing too is, when we get to these conference tournaments, you just don't know. I mean, it comes to what team has it going at the right time. We talk about Gonzaga and Baylor. They both have it rolling right now, but what if something happens in conference tournament time and, say Baylor loses a game in the conference tournament? It shouldn't. Of course, it's still going to go to the NCAA tournament, but how does that affect the team mentally? How are they able to respond and keep getting off the mat when they keep getting some tough shots when they get to the tournament? But if those teams are getting if they're getting those answers and building that momentum and going on winning streaks, you never know. You just that's the beauty of March Madness, though, right? You never know what small program, what blue blood, what whoever. You have no idea who could possibly win this thing, and that's why every year everybody does the bracket, because you want to be like, oh, I saw this team doing this before anybody else. That's the beauty of it, but. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's just we're just going to have to sit back and wait and find out.
Yeah. Coley, I'll help you out with Alabama. So Alabama's 17-5 right now. They're tied with Arkansas. Actually, Alabama's 12-1 in the SEC. So the SEC is not just a football school. No. Alabama's playing well. Arkansas, LSU, Tennessee. Alabama's 6-3 against quadrant 1 teams. So they're playing really well. Like you said, that could be a team that could make a deep run in the play.
Yeah, I see. I hadn't been paying attention in the last couple of weeks. I knew they had such a nice, strong first half of the year. But that's what I'm saying. These are teams that certainly Alabama has had moments where it kind of has taken off, but it hasn't been like Tennessee in years past. Tennessee's getting getting some of that acclaim. Arkansas is getting back, as you mentioned as well. And some of that you're taking advantage of Kentucky being down. In the ACC, you're taking advantage of Duke and North Carolina being down. And I think that's having an impact on some of those programs. So, I mean, if Alabama goes on a run, you heard it here first.
Heard it here first, right? Anything can happen. And we've seen it happen in March Madness. So I can't wait to get the bracket done and put it out there and see what happens. Hopefully it does not let me down. I always do too. The logic and then going with the logic and then going with the heart. So we'll have to, once that
trick never works for me. Yeah, that trick never works for me.
So once that time comes, we'll have to put, our brackets, send them to each other, and then see if we have a winner out of the three.
I'm just excited, Joanna and Coley, that we're actually having a tournament this year. It's going to be all based in and around the Indianapolis area, and we can actually get a field of 68 going. It's one of the best events in all of sports. This NCAA tournament, this March Madness thing, and we're actually going to have one this year.
Well, and I'll tell you too, until I had moved back to the middle, I went to college in the Midwest, but until I moved back a couple of years ago, I kind of forgot just how underrated the basketball scene is in Indianapolis, or excuse me, in the state of Indiana, I should say. So the gyms that they're going to be playing in for the NCAA tournament, I mean, I hate that fans can't be there because those places, all of them really, are raucous. The energy is just insane when fans are there. I've been to a few of them. I haven't been to all of them, but I've been to a few of them. But, you're talking about Mackey Arena at Purdue, which is a nice, small, circular, very, very intimate building. It gets very, very loud. It is as good a basketball environment across the country as there is. And people just don't know about it because Purdue's, doesn't have the same national acclaim. That's another program, actually. If Purdue gets going well in the Big Ten tournament, I would not be surprised to see the Boilermakers go on a run. They're not one of the top tier teams of the Big Ten. They're kind of in the middle tier, which is, it's still, again, a very good conference.
They're not bad at all.
Yeah, but Purdue's in that mix. Assembly Hall, obviously, in Bloomington, where the Hoosiers play, is I mean, that's basketball history right there. Butler, Hinkie Fieldhouse. You got the main tournament right there at Lucas Oil Stadium, which is such a massive building. I just going on and on, just thinking of the places that the tournament or that the NCAA has set aside. It's going to make for a very magical couple of weeks for sure.
And I want to ask about the schedule. It's setting up a little bit different, the structure. They're going to play the first 4 games are going to be, or let me go ahead and go backtrack a little bit. They're going to play one day. They're going to do all the games for that first day when this tournament starts. Then they're going to be splitting up the games. So the first round will be played Friday, March 19th and Saturday, March 20th. It's a different type of structure because we see from years past. So it seems like it's going to advance a bit more quicker.
A little faster, yeah.
Yeah. And is that a benefit or a disadvantage?
I think that it's just purely logistics, right? The fact that teams aren't having to fly all across the country. Granted, you'll fly across the country from wherever you are to meet to Indy, but you're not having to fly back and forth after that. Say if you win your first game, you're not, first 2 games, you're not flying back across country somewhere else, So I think that's probably a big part of the reason why logistically it's going to work. Advantage, honestly, I think it could be an advantage. I'm not sure what the schedule breakdown looks like. Say if you win your first game, do you play the next day too? Was that what it would be? Say if you win your opening round game, you play the next day, or would you have a break?
So the first round, like let's say just the first round, they're going to be played Friday and Saturday, the 19th and the 20th, and then they're going to move on to the following day, the 21st and the 22nd for the
Gotcha.
Second round.
The second round, yep. The Sweet 16, they'll take a 5-day break. That'll be on the 27th and the 28th, and the Elite 8 will be that following Monday, the 29th and the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
And then they take a few days off. For the Final 4 will be April 3rd and Monday, April 5th.
Gotcha. Yeah, it is actually, in total, it is sped up. But in terms of the rounds themselves, I think it's still probably fairly comparable, because it is like you play, say, on a Friday, Saturday off and then you play Sunday, or you play Thursday, Friday off, and then you play Saturday. And so that sounds like that's probably fairly comparable. And, I like the fact that they're still getting them in and out.